The alien screams were deafening. As the human Marines stormed their stronghold, plasma rifles blazing and power armor crushing the once invincible alien flesh. Terry Russell leaned on the bar and took a swig of his drink, the blue liquid burning his throat. The tentacled bartender Zorg wiped a glass with one appendage, while gesturing at the news screen with another. Damn TAC are at it again. Half the Orion arm is on fire. Refugees flooding in from a dozen systems. It's a real mess out there. Terry scoffed. Alliance finally call in the big guns? Zorg shook his head, tentacles writhing. Nah. Bunch of bureaucrats and politicians too proud to admit they need help, especially from you humans. No offense. None taken. Terry signaled for another drink. TAC used to seem invincible to the likes of you, invincible to the whole damn galaxy till we got the call. Zorg's eye stalk swiveled to focus on Terry, pupils dilating with interest. He slid a fresh drink across the bar. This one's on the house. I smell a story that'll beat anything on the vids. How'd you humans succeed where 100 other Alliance races failed? Terry took a deep swig, ice cubes clinking as he set the glass back down. He wiped his mouth with the back of a scarred hand, remembering the fear, the adrenaline, the blood and sweat and tears, the sacrifices, the triumphs snatched from the jaws of defeat. TAC were crushing the Alliance like bugs. Their tech, their weapons, their shielding, centuries ahead of yours, of ours. Any system they wanted, they took. Slaves and genocide left in their wake. Alliance threw everything they had, fleets, soldiers, experimental weapons. Nothing scratched the bastards. Terry leaned forward, voice low and gravelly. They were smug, assured of victory, never met a challenge they couldn't crush. Till some pencil pusher had a wild idea. Call in the humans. We were the new kids on the block, primitive, volatile, unpredictable. He tapped the scarred metal of his power armor. But we had a few tricks up our sleeves. Tricks no TAC ever imagined. Tricks to make the Invincible bleed. Terry looked Zorg dead in the eyes. When the call came, we answered. Marines, Rangers, Epsilon Force, best of the best. One chance to turn the tide, to do the impossible. And if we failed, TAC would roll over us like every other species. Human extinction guaranteed. He raised his glass in a mock toast and took a swig. But we don't believe in Invincible, just challenges no one's solved yet. Time to show the TAC what humanity fuck yeah really means. Aye, sir. Terry's new audience leaned in, amazed yet horrified at the twist to the story. The Indomitable was half wreckage from the Invictus' initial shot. The death of Captain Alvarez had sent the crew into chaos. Some were screaming, "It's over, there's no way we can win now, we've got to run." Others were scrambling to escape pods. Lieutenant Commander Singh looked at the panicking crewmates. He saw the fear in their eyes, the desire to give up and flee. He grabbed the ship's intercom. "Indomitable, this is Singh. I know we're hurting. I know we're scared. But this is what we trained for. This is why Earth sent us. To do the impossible, to stand when others would run. Captain Alvarez believed in us, in each of you, so let's honor that belief. Let's finish this." Singh scanned the tactical readouts, searching for a way to turn the tide. Then he saw it, a faint flicker in the Invictus's shield frequency, a weakness. He opened a fleet-wide channel. "All ships, concentrate your fire on the following coordinates. Hammer that spot with everything you've got." Plasma cannons, missiles, railguns, every human weapon focused on that single point. The Invictus's shields flared, straining under the onslaught. Singh watched, his heart pounding. The shields flickered once, twice, then failed completely. Singh knew this was their only chance. He gripped the intercom. "All hands, brace for impact." He turned to the helmsman. "Full speed ahead, ram them." The Indomitable surged forward, engines roaring, hull groaning. The Invictus loomed ahead, its hull exposed, vulnerable. General Crackson's eyes widened in disbelief as he realized what was about to happen. The human ship struck the Invictus head-on, the impact shaking both vessels to their cores. The Indomitable shuddered violently as Singh pushed its ruined engines beyond their limits. Consoles exploded in showers of sparks, Injured crew members screamed in agony, but the ship held together through sheer force of will. On the viewscreen, the Invictus loomed larger and larger, its hull pitted and scarred from the battle. "Brace for impact," Singh roared over the cacophony of alarms. The collision was cataclysmic. The Indomitable's reinforced prow crumpled like tinfoil as it rammed the Invictus' weakened shields. The force of the impact sent crew members flying, bones shattering against bulkheads. Terry felt his teeth rattle in his skull, tasted blood in his mouth. The forward half of the Indomitable disintegrated, vaporized by the Invictus' failing shields. But the sacrifice was not in vain. The Invictus reeled from the blow, its shields collapsing, its forward decks crushed by the Indomitable's mass. Explosions rippled across its hull as critical systems failed. The behemoth listed, drifting helplessly. In the Indomitable's ruined CIC, an eerie silence fell. Consoles flickered, the air thick with smoke and the copper tang of blood. Terry pulled himself to his feet, his head ringing. He stared at the twisted metal that had once been the command chair, knowing Singh's broken body lay somewhere beneath. Across the fleet, a ragged cheer went up as the Invictus's plight became apparent. Human ships surged forward, weapons blazing, seizing the opportunity Singh had bought with his life. Boarding pods lanced out from the remaining vessels, latching onto the Invictus's scarred hide like angry ticks. Terry joined the nearest boarding party, his weapon clutched tight. They breached the Invictus hull, storming into the acrid smoke and flickering emergency lights of the wounded ship. Tak-tak warriors met them in the tight corridors, all gnashing teeth and slashing claws. Plasma fire lit the gloom, the air filled with screams and the sizzle of burning flesh. They fought for every inch, leaving a trail of human and Tak-tak dead in their wake. Terry's world narrowed to the next target, the next burst of fire, the next snarling alien face. The rage and grief of the Indomitable's loss drove him on, an inexhaustible fuel. Deck by deck they advanced, the resistance growing fiercer with each section. Near the bridge, the corridors were choked with the dead and dying of both sides. Terry clambered over the corpses of friends and foes alike, his armor slick with blood of myriad colors. They breached the bridge in a hail of plasma fire and shattered metal. There, amid the carnage, stood General Craxon. The Tak-tak leader was a towering figure, his exoskeleton a bristling array of spikes and armored plates. His 4 eyes burned with malevolent intelligence, his claws dripping with the gore of the humans he'd already slain. Terry and his comrades fanned out, weapons trained on the general. Craxon hissed, a sound that resonated in the bones, that spoke of centuries of conquest and cruelty. He lunged with blinding speed, scything through the nearest human, armor and flesh, parting like water before his claws. But the humans outnumbered him, and more than that, they had a fury and will that no Tak-tak could match. They swarmed the general, lashing out with a storm of blows. Craxon fought like a titan, each swipe of his claws reaping a bloody toll. But the humans refused to fall, refused to give in. Terry ducked under a slashing claw, his plasma rifle forgotten, his combat knife in hand. He leapt onto the general's back, finding the chinks in that nigh impenetrable armor. He stabbed again and again, each blow fueled by the memory of fallen friends, of shattered worlds left in the Tak-tak's wake. Craxon's claws flashed, a blur of obsidian. Terry barely dodged, the razor edges grazing his cheek. He tasted blood. The general pressed his attack, a whirlwind of slashing talons and thundering blows. Terry ducked and weaved, his knife darting in to seek gaps in the chitinous armor. But Craxon was fast, inhumanly so. His claws seemed to be everywhere at once, a wall of death that defied penetration. Around them the battle raged. Marines grappled with Tak-tak warriors, the tight confines of the bridge a seething mass of straining bodies and flashing blades. Plasma fire seared the air, the acrid stench of burning flesh and melted metal choking the lungs. Terry saw his comrades fall one by one. Craxon was a force of nature, unstoppable. His claws ripped through armor like paper, spilled entrails on the deck. His roar shook the air, a primal challenge that turned blood to ice. But the humans wouldn't break. They swarmed the general, heedless of their losses. For every marine that fell, 2 more took their place, harrying the Tak-Tak leader from all sides. Terry saw his opening. He lunged, his knife aimed at Craxon's throat, but the general was too quick. His claw caught Terry's arm, the chitin edge biting deep. Terry screamed, pain exploding up his arm. His knife clattered to the deck. Craxon reared back, ready to deliver the killing blow. Terry stared up at him, defiant to the end. Then the plasma bolt struck, a lance of searing blue. It caught Craxon in the back, burned through his armor. The general staggered, his roar turning to a shriek of agony. Terry looked past him, saw the Marine Nguyen propped against a console. His armor was a ruin, his face a mask of blood, but his rifle was steady, aimed squarely at Craxon's back. The general fell to his knees, his claws scrabbling at the smoking hole in his carapace. He tried to rise, his eyes burning with unquenchable hate, but his strength failed him. He slumped, a titan brought low. Terry approached him, clutching his wounded arm. He looked down at the fallen general, saw the defiance still burning in those inhuman eyes. "Surrender," Terry said, his voice a hoarse rasp. "It's over." Craxon hissed a rattle of contempt. "Never," he snarled. "A Tak-Tak does not surrender. A Tak-Tak does not know defeat." Terry shook his head. "You fought well," he said. "You fought with honor, but it's finished. Yield and your life will be spared." Craxon's eyes narrowed. For a moment, Terry thought he saw something there, a flicker of doubt, of weariness, the burden of centuries of war, of endless conquest. But it was gone in an instant, replaced by an inferno of rage. Craxon lunged, his last reserve of strength propelling him forward. His claws reached for Terry's throat, a final desperate attack. Terry reacted on instinct. His hand found his sidearm, drew it in a blur. The plasma pistol kicked once, twice. The bolts took Craxon in the chest, burned through his heart. The general slumped back, his eyes wide with shock. He looked at Terry, his gaze a mix of hatred and something else, something almost like respect. "Saosi fought well, human," he rasped, his voice a bubbling whisper. "You won." And with those words, the last of the Tak-Tak generals breathed his last. The Invictus was theirs. The battle was won. But as Terry looked around at the carnage, at the broken bodies of his comrades, he knew the cost had been high. Too high. The war wasn't over. There would be other battles, other worlds to liberate. But for now, in this moment, they had achieved the impossible. They had shown the galaxy what humanity was capable of. Terry turned to his surviving Marines, saw the same realization in their eyes. "For Earth," he said, his voice ringing with exhaustion and grim pride. "For humanity." "Oorah," came the reply, a ragged chorus from a dozen throats. "Oorah!" Terry took a deep breath, the recycled air of the alien ship bitter on his tongue. There was still work to do, still a ship to secure, still a system to liberate. But in this moment, he allowed himself a small measure of satisfaction. They had done it. Against all odds, against an enemy that had never known defeat, they had prevailed. Humanity had drawn a line in the stars and shown the universe that they would not be cowed. Terry's voice trailed off, his eyes unfocused as he relived those pivotal moments. The bar seemed to fade away, replaced by the acrid stench of burning circuits and scorched flesh, the flashing of emergency lights, the moans of the wounded and dying. He saw again the twisted wreckage of the Invictus's bridge, the bodies of friend and foe alike strewn across the deck. He felt the weight of Craxon's corpse under his boot, the sticky warmth of the alien's blood on his hands. Zorg's tentacle on his arm brought him back to the present. The bartender's eyes were wide, his voice a hushed whisper. What happened next? Terry drained his glass, relishing the burn of the alcohol. He set it down with a thunk, his scarred hands trembling slightly. "We secured the Invictus. Those Tak-Tak who hadn't been killed in the fighting surrendered. They were broken, their spirits shattered along with their ship." He paused, his jaw clenching. "But our own losses were staggering. Of the Marines who'd boarded the Invictus, less than a quarter made it out alive. And the Indomitable, His voice caught. He cleared his throat, blinking hard. The Indomitable was gone, destroyed, along with most of her crew. Over 1,000 lives snuffed out in an instant. The bar was silent, the patrons hanging on Terry's every word. The weight of those lives, of that sacrifice, seemed to hang in the air. We limped back to the nearest friendly port, our ships battered, our crews exhausted. We tended to our wounded, repaired what we could, and we mourned. Terry's eyes were distant, seeing not the bar but the long rows of coffins, the tear-stained faces of the bereaved. So many funerals, so many good men and women gone forever, each one a hero, each one a light snuffed out too soon. He sighed, his shoulders slumping. But even in our grief we knew what we had achieved. The impossible. We had beaten the unbeatable. We had shown the galaxy that the Tak-Tak could bleed, could be defeated. A hint of a smile touched his lips. The news spread faster than a ship through hyperspace. Across the Alliance, across the neutral worlds, even to the Tak-Tak themselves. Humanity had done what no one else could. We had stood against the unstoppable, and we had won. He leaned back, his eyes glinting. It was a turning point. The Tak-Tak's aura of invincibility was shattered. Their subject worlds, so long cowed into submission, began to rebel. The Alliance, emboldened by our victory, launched a series of counterattacks. Suddenly the Tak-Tak were on the defensive, fighting to hold what they had conquered instead of pushing forward. Terry chuckled, a sound of grim satisfaction. They couldn't cope. They'd never known defeat, never had to fight a foe that could truly challenge them. Each loss, each setback, it chipped away at their unity, their resolve. Rebellions flared on a dozen worlds. Their fleets, once an unstoppable juggernaut, found themselves mired in 100 small battles, their strength sapped bit by bit. He leaned forward, his voice low and intense. It was the beginning of the end for them. Oh, they fought hard, they made us bleed for every inch, but the writing was on the wall. The myth of their invincibility was broken, and with it, their hold on the galaxy. Terry fell silent, his tale told. The bar seemed to collectively exhale, the patrons exchanging looks of awe and disbelief. Zorg wiped a tear-stained eye with a tentacle, his voice hoarse. I never realized what you humans had done, what you had sacrificed. Terry shrugged, his smile sad. Most don't. It's not the kind of story that gets told in the history books, too messy, too painful. But we remember. Those of us who were there, we carry the memory of the fallen, of the Indomitable, of Singh and Alvarez and all the rest. Their sacrifice, it wasn't in vain. It was the spark that lit the fire that burned the Tak-Tak Empire to ash. He stood, tossing a credit chip on the bar. Keep the change, Zorg, and keep telling the story, the real story. The galaxy shouldn't forget what it cost to be free. With that, Terry turned and walked out of the bar, his boots echoing on the metal floor. Behind him, the patrons erupted into excited chatter, the tale of the Invictus and the Indomitable already spreading, already growing into legend. But Terry didn't look back. His eyes were on the stars, on the infinite expanse of space. The war was over, but the memories, the scars, they would never fade. He carried them with him, a burden and a badge of honor. For he was human, and he had stood against the darkness, against the unstoppable, and he had won. Terry pauses, his eyes hardening as he recalls the challenges of hunting down the remaining Tak-Tak leaders. It was a different kind of war, he says, his voice low and grim. Infiltration, sabotage, assassination. We had to be ghosts striking from the shadows. He leans forward, his scarred hands gripping his glass. I remember one mission, deep in Tak-Tak space. Our target was a warlord named Zavrak, holed up in a fortress on some godforsaken moon. Terry's eyes grow distant, seeing not the bar but the harsh alien landscape of that distant world. We inserted by stealth shuttle, landed a click from the base, had to hike the rest of the way, through jagged canyons and poisonous mists. He shakes his head, a mirthless chuckle escaping his lips. Zavrak, he was a piece of work, mad scientist type, always tinkering, always experimenting. On his own kind, on his prisoners, didn't matter to him. Terry's voice drops to a whisper, forcing his audience to lean in. We breached the outer defenses easy enough, but inside it was a nightmare. Tak-tak abominations, half-living, half-machine, Zavrak's twisted creations. His hand unconsciously goes to his face, tracing a jagged scar. We fought our way to the central lab, and there he was, Zavrak himself. But he wasn't Tak-tak anymore, not fully. Terry shudders, the memory still vivid. He had changed himself, grafted metal and circuitry to his flesh. His eyes, they glowed with this sickly light. He takes a swig of his drink, his hand shaking slightly. It was a hell of a fight. Zavrak, he was fast, strong, felt no pain. We lost Jenkins, Markowski, Chen, good soldiers, all of them. Terry's jaw clenches, his knuckles white on his glass. But we put him down, pumped him full of plasma, cut his monstrous heart out, made sure he stayed dead. He sighs, the sound heavy with the weight of memory. Zavrak's death, it was a turning point, showed the galaxy that the Tak-tak weren't invincible, that even their worst, their most feared, could bleed. Terry leans back, his eyes focusing once more on his audience. But it wasn't over, not by a long shot. Zavrak, he was just one head of the Hydra. There were others, always others. He drains his glass, sets it down with a thunk. The war, it changed after that, became a hunt, a shadow game. And we were the hunters, the ghosts in the dark. Terry's voice grows cold, a hint of something dark and dangerous in his tone. We hunted them across the stars, the Tak-tak leaders. One by one, we found them, we ended them. No matter where they hid, no matter how deep they burrowed, we rooted them out. He leans forward, his eyes glinting in the dim light of the bar. It was a bloody business, a grim trade, but it was necessary. The only way to end the war, to break the Tak-tak once and for all. Terry falls silent, his tale paused but not concluded. The weight of his words hangs in the air, a palpable presence. His audience waits, breathless, for the next chapter in this saga of war and sacrifice. A heavy silence falls over the bar as Terry recounts the grim memory. His scarred hands grip his glass, knuckles white with tension. He takes a deep breath before continuing. We hit the ground running, our boots pounding on the colony's dusty streets. The settlement was a maze of prefab structures and narrow alleys, perfect for an ambush. We moved cautiously, weapons at the ready, scanning every window and doorway for signs of the enemy. Terry's voice is low and strained, the words coming in short bursts. It didn't take long for the shooting to start. Plasma bolts sizzled past our heads, searing the air. The Tak-tak had set up kill zones, firing from fortified positions in the civilian homes. He shakes his head, a bitter laugh escaping his lips. They had no regard for the colonists, used them as living shields, herding them into the line of fire. We saw families huddled in terror, children crying as the bullets flew. Terry's eyes are haunted, seeing not the bar but the chaos of that bloody day. We had to make split-second decisions, return fire and risk hitting civilians, or hold back and let the Tak-tak gun us down. There were no good choices, only shades of bad. His voice drops to a whisper, raw with emotion. I saw a young mother clutching her baby caught in the crossfire. She was hit, her body jerking as the plasma burned through her. The baby was screaming, covered in her blood. Terry's hand shakes as he raises his glass to his lips, downing the contents in one gulp. We pushed forward, inch by bloody inch. The Tak-tak fought like demons, their desperation fueling their ferocity. They set traps, rigged buildings to explode. We lost Mendes to a hidden mine, his legs blown off at the knee. He closes his eyes, the sounds of battle echoing in his mind. The screams, the smell of burning flesh, the feel of hot blood splattering your face. It's something you never forget. It clings to you, seeps into your pores, becomes a part of you. Terry's voice hardens, a steely edge creeping in. But we couldn't stop, couldn't let the horrors paralyze us. We had a mission, a duty to fulfill. We pushed on, through the smoke and the blood and the chaos. He leans forward, his eyes boring into his listeners. In the end, we cornered the Tak-Tak leaders in a central compound. They had nowhere left to run, nowhere to hide. We breached the doors, stormed in with guns blazing. Terry's jaw clenches, the muscles in his neck straining. The fight was brutal, close quarters. We were tripping over bodies, slipping in pools of blood. The Tak-Tak leaders fought to the last, their claws ripping into flesh, their screams echoing off the walls. He takes a shuddering breath, his voice raw. When it was over, when the last shot had been fired and the last Tak-Tak had fallen, we stood among the carnage. The compound was a slaughterhouse, the floors slick with mingled human and Tak-Tak blood. Terry looks down at his hands, seeing the phantom stains of that day. We had won. The leaders were dead, their threat eliminated. But the cost was so high. The innocent lives lost, the destruction wrought. It hollowed us out, left us questioning everything we fought for. He meets his listener's eyes, his gaze haunted. That day taught me that victory isn't always clean. It isn't always righteous. Sometimes it's just the lesser of two evils. And the scars it leaves, the toll it takes on the soul, that's something you carry with you forever. Terry falls silent, his story hanging in the air like smoke after a battle. The bar is quiet, each patron lost in their own thoughts, their own reflections on the price of war. In the distance, a siren wails, a haunting echo of the memories Terry has shared. The sound seems to shake him from his reverie. He straightens, his shoulders squaring as if bracing for another fight. But we couldn't dwell on it, couldn't let the guilt consume us. There was still a war to fight, still a mission to complete. The Tak-Tak were on the ropes, their leadership crumbling. We had to press the advantage, to strike, while they were vulnerable. Terry's voice takes on a grim determination. We set our sights on the Tak-Tak homeworld, the heart of their empire. It was time to end this once and for all. Time to bring the fight to their doorstep and make them answer for every atrocity, every innocent life snuffed out in their quest for domination. He leans back, his eyes hardening. The final push, the last battle. It would be the hardest fight of our lives, the ultimate test of our resolve. But we were ready, ready to face whatever horrors the Tak-Tak threw at us, ready to pay whatever price victory demanded. Terry's hand closes around his empty glass, his grip tight. We knew, each of us, that we might not come back, that we might be called upon to make the ultimate sacrifice, but we also knew that it would be worth it. To end the Tak-Tak threat, to secure a future for the galaxy, there was no higher calling. He looks around at his listeners, his gaze fierce. So we gathered our strength, rallied our forces, every ship, every soldier, every weapon at our disposal. This was it, the final chapter in a war that had consumed us, body and soul. Terry pauses, the weight of the memories heavy in the cramped bar. The patrons lean forward, the clinking of glasses and murmur of conversation fading as they strain to catch every word. Terry's eyes focus on a point beyond the bar, beyond the station. In his mind's eye, he sees the massed ships of the Alliance fleet, a kaleidoscope of shapes and sizes, united in purpose. The bridge of his own ship, the Retribution, is a hive of tense activity. Crew members hunched over consoles, voices tight with controlled urgency. "Fire approaching the Tak-Tak perimeter," the navigator calls out. 200,000 clicks and closing. Terry nods, his gaze fixed on the view screen. Takrath looms ahead, a mottled brown and green orb, deceptively serene. But as they draw closer, the planet's defenses come into focus. A bristling network of orbital platforms, each one studded with enough firepower to vaporize a small fleet. "All ships, this is Admiral Valdez." The voice crackles over the comm, steady and resolute. "Commence attack run. Fighters, break formation and engage at will. Capital ships, focus fire on the orbital platforms. Let's punch a hole in those defenses." The fleet surges forward, a tide of metal and determination. Immediately the void lights up with the flash of weapons fire. The Tak-Tak defenses open up, a storm of plasma and missiles that rips into the leading ships. Hulls buckle and breach, venting atmosphere and crew into the pitiless vacuum. But the Alliance presses on, absorbing the losses, pushing forward. Fighters dart and weave, drawing fire, strafing the platforms. Bombers swoop in, braving the flak, delivering their payloads to vulnerable points. On the Retribution's bridge, the deck shudders beneath Terry's feet, the ship groaning as it takes a glancing hit. Damage reports flood in, a cacophony of urgent voices and blaring alarms. Shields at 60%. Hull breach on deck 7. We've lost the Dauntless and the Firefrost. Terry grits his teeth, his hands white-knuckled on the command chair. Every loss is a knife to the gut, a reminder of the cost of this war. But he can't afford to dwell on it, can't let the weight of the dead drag him down. Stay focused, he barks, his voice cutting through the chaos. Keep firing, we're almost through. And they are. Slowly, painfully, the Alliance fleet punches through the outer defenses. Tuk-tak ships boil out to meet them, a swarm of jagged black shapes, all spikes and bristling weapons. The battle becomes a close-quarters brawl, ships trading broadsides at point-blank range. Fighters dueling in dizzying swirls. Terry loses himself in the rhythm of the fight, issuing orders, coordinating with the other ships. The minutes bleed into hours, each second an eternity of smoke and blood and screaming metal. And then suddenly a cheer rises over the comm. The last orbital platform shatters, its fragments spinning into the void. The path to Takrath is open, the way clear for the ground invasion. But as Terry stares at the viewscreen, at the angry red wound of the planet's surface, he feels no elation, no sense of victory, only a grim determination, a cold resolve. The battle is far from over. The real fight, the bloodiest fight, is yet to come. On the surface, in the warren of tunnels and bunkers that riddle Takrath's crust, the Tuk-tak will make their last stand, and the Alliance, the weary warriors who have come so far, sacrificed so much, will meet them head-on. Terry rises from his chair, his eyes hard. Prepare the dropships, he orders. We're going in. The bar seems to hold its breath, the patrons caught in the grip of Terry's tail. They can almost feel the heat of the battle, smell the acrid stench of burning metal and seared flesh. Terry takes a sip of his drink, the ice cubes clinking softly. His eyes are distant, seeing not the bar but the drop bay of the Retribution, the rows of armored Marines checking their weapons, the nervous energy that crackles through the air. He remembers the jolt of the dropship launching, the stomach-churning plunge towards the surface, the rattle of the hull as the Tuk-tak anti-air fire streaks past, the grunts and curses of the Marines as they're thrown against their harnesses. The dropship hits the ground hard, its landing gear slamming into the rocky soil of Takrath. The ramp slams down and the Marines pour out, weapons ready, eyes scanning the jagged landscape. Terry is among them, his plasma rifle nestled against his shoulder, his blood singing with the familiar mix of fear and anticipation. Around them, other dropships disgorge their cargo, a tide of armored figures spreading out across the barren plain. In the distance, the spires of a Tuk-tak city rise like jagged teeth, a bristling fortress of black metal and pulsing energy shields. That is their target. That is where the Tuk-tak leadership is holed up, directing the final defense of their homeworld. That is where this war will end, one way or another. Terry takes a deep breath, tasting the alien air, feeling the crunch of alien soil beneath his boots. He looks at the Marines around him, sees the determination in their eyes, the set of their jaws. They are ready, ready to fight, ready to die if necessary, ready to end this war no matter the cost. Move out, Terry orders, his voice steady. Stay close, watch your corners, the Tuk-tak will be waiting for us. And with that, the Marines begin their advance, a grim procession across the blasted landscape. Above them, the sky burns with the light of 1,000 ships, the fate of the galaxy hanging in the balance. In the bar, Terry falls silent, his tail paused on the precipice of the final battle. His audience leans forward, their eyes wide, their breaths held. They know the story is far from over, that the greatest challenge, the greatest sacrifice is yet to come. But for now, they are content to wait, to let the anticipation build, to savor the calm before the storm. Terry takes another sip of his drink, his mind far away, lost in the memories of that fateful day. The day that would decide the fate of the galaxy. The day that would test the mettle of every warrior, human and alien alike. The day of reckoning on the blasted surface of Takrath. If you finished this story, please subscribe and like the video. Then leave a comment that says, "I liked the story," and I will heart every single one of them. It really helps me. Thank you for your time.